What's going on, guys? JPS back for another video, and today we're going to be reacting to why did American cars fail in Europe? Let's get right into this, guys. I have a lot of opinions about this. I think that American cars failed in America, or the United States as it should be called. But without further ado, let's see. We got Chrysler, Chevy. That might also be a Chrysler. It looks disgusting. Let's get right into this. Oh my God.
Why did American cars fail in Europe? Let's explore. I'm sure you're all aware by now that American cars and American manufacturers simply couldn't take off in Europe. No matter how much they tried, two of the big three simply couldn't get enough people interested in their cars. Why did this happen? Well, the simple answer is they didn't do it properly. And that requires us to start with looking at the one automaker that did do it properly. Ford. Ford is, to all intents and purposes, an American automaker. However, when it came time to expand into the European market, Ford actually put a fair amount of thought into it. They did have a presence before that, but the Blue Oval's European outfit, aptly named Ford of Europe, was found—
Let me guess. Ford Fiesta, subcompact car, Ford Focus, hatchbacks, smaller, better fuel economy, better suited for European customers, which other American automakers just simply can't wrap their head around. Oh my God, they have smaller roads. Oh my, gasoline's not as cheap there. People don't need larger vehicles. Let's just sell them the same thing. Large vehicles, whatever. We're American. Like, it's almost as if some American brands went to Europe without even thinking about what they would want. Like, what?
Founded in 1967, merging the automaker's UK, Germany, and Ireland offshoots. That's the Republic of Ireland, by the way. In 1967, the first model to appear from this new merger was the original Transit, which would go on to become the literal face of vans in Europe,
Oh
certainly
my
the
God.
UK, and rightfully so. Ford of Europe continued to do the European expansion properly by opening production facilities all over Europe. Today, the European arm of Ford operates 7 manufacturing facilities on the continent, in the UK, Germany, Romania, Turkey, and Spain. Ford also did this whole thing right by developing and designing cars specifically for the European market. The Fiesta, although they tried to market it to North America, which failed miserably, went on to become such a huge success in Europe that they discontinued it last year. Nice! Yes, I'm also bitter about the Fiesta's discontinuation, but it really was hugely successful in Europe, and the same applied to one of the C-segment's darlings, the Focus. Ford's first—
I'm pretty sure Ford, I know it's successful in Europe, but even more so in the UK. I see Ford everywhere when I'm in England. It's just so big. Like, it's honestly surprising that it got that successful and popular.
Crossover SUV specifically designed for Europe, the Kuga also did and still is doing great, and the same could be said of their Europe-specific minivans, the C-Max, the S-Max, and the Galaxy spelled with a Y at the end, by the way, which all showed the continent that minivans don't have to be boring. So there we are, Ford of Europe did everything correctly as far as an expansion to Europe is concerned, which is why they're still very successful here. So what happened to the other two? Let's start with everybody's favorite manufacturer of totally reliable cars, trust me bro, General Motors. Like Ford, General Motors also had a pretty substantial presence in Europe by the latter half of the 20th century. They had acquired Opel fully by 1931, and then in 1990, they acquired Saab and managed to destroy them in just 20 years. Great job. 4 years prior, in 1986, GM also officially formed General Motors Europe.
Dude, General Motors, even in the United States, they are known as just garbage. Overpriced vehicles that are just not reliable. You never get your money's worth with a General Motors vehicle. And of course, they're going to buy out a brand and ruin it. That sounds about right.
Relegated GM's operations in Europe to Opel, Vauxhall, and then Saab. Now we arrive at the early to mid-90s. This was the time when another, seemingly unrelated but actually very relevant to the story, automaker was entering the European market. Daewoo. Daewoo cars started to trickle into Europe in the 90s with a focus on value for money. The Tico, based on the 80s Suzuki Alto, was a beats-taking-the-bus type of vehicle, but it sold like hotcakes, especially in former Yugoslavia. One above that was the Nexia, which was a small, Golf-ish sized hatchback, and you could have a sedan too. At the top sat the Espero, which wowed journalists at the time for offering a ton of equipment for basically no money. Continuing into the late 90s, Daewoo's Lanos, Nubira, Evanda, which was also known under 10 different other names, and the horribly ugly Tacoma were all doing fine in Europe. And then Daewoo went bankrupt and General Motors scooped them up in 2002. With General Motors now at the reins of Daewoo, they devised one of the stupidest, most befuddling strategies I've ever heard. General Motors founded Chevrolet Europe in 2005 in Switzerland with the promise that the Chevrolet brand would return to Europe. However, there was a problem. The real Chevrolet's lineup back then was entirely unsuitable for the European market. The Avalanche, the Impala, the Silverado, the Blazer, you get the idea. Big cars, even bigger engines, terrible gas mileage. None of these qualities are something that the average European buyer was looking for. So what did Chevy do? They rebranded Daewoo models from their Korean arm as Chevrolets and sold them in Europe. Yep, instead of doing the Ford thing and opening proper manufacturing facilities in Europe and designing cars specifically for the European market, Chevy just crossed out the letters Daewoo and wrote Chevrolet in Sharpie. And hey presto, new car. This resulted in abominations like the Chevy Spark, the Aveo, the Lacetti, the Captiva, and my personal nut favorite, the Orlando.
Wow, I did not know that's where these cars came from, because obviously we know that Chevy Spark is still around. I'm not sure about these other ones, but they really did just copy the previous models and just threw a Chevy logo on it. That's so embarrassing. Yo, this makes me so embarrassed. And also, guys, what I said in the introduction, how American car manufacturers failed in the United States, the reason for that is if you look at the United States car market, 40% of vehicles sold in the United States are Japanese. Like the top vehicles, Toyota Corolla, Camry, Honda Civic, Honda Accord. And you can get even further than that. Like, I believe, I don't want to say this, Hyundai, Lexus might be Japanese. There's so many Japanese car brands. And when you go onto the streets in the United States, that's all you see. Because guess what? People want reliable, fuel efficient, like compact vehicles. Sedans are super popular here. The reason why American car manufacturers don't buy into that is because SUVs and trucks have insane profit margins because they can hike up the value. You can sell a truck in the United States now for $80, $90, even $100,000. And we're not talking about some insane truck. We're talking about like a regular truck. Like obviously it's a 2025 model. It's going to have the technology and all that, but it's just a regular truck. But those are marked up to such extreme values. And there's just more of a profit there. So again, the Japanese cars, I believe almost 3 million Japanese cars were sold last year in the United States. They absolutely dominate our market. I actually own a Toyota Corolla, so I'm bought into that as well. Because guess what? Their cars are just better. They're so much more reliable. You don't have to pay more for the maintenance fees. Extremely good fuel economy. It's everything you could ask for. And they're not small either. Like it's a sedan. It's plenty big for this country. But I'm telling you, these American car manufacturers, they are extremely greedy. So when you put profits and money first, you're not going to have a good product. And you're not going to have longevity. And I honestly hope they go under because, like, what even is that, bro? Get out of here. We need to run them out of this country. It's just so embarrassing, honestly. Of course they would fail in Europe. They didn't take into account anything that the Europeans wanted. So they deserve to fail at that point.
Europe, but these were meant to be Chevy's volume sellers. I think that the only somewhat good car to come out of this...
Wait, hold on. Let me read what that said real quick. This guy is flaming GM right now. Yeah, that is true, though. German cars dominate Europe, and they also are huge in the United States as well, as you guys know. So I don't think they needed any GM over there, guys. We got the BMW, Volkswagen. You guys are good. And it must be cheaper as well.
Somewhat good car to come out of this whole Daewoo bullshit was the Cruze. They were in Macedonia volume sellers because Macedonia is a poor-ass third world country and people needed cheap cars. Eventually, Chevrolet withdrew from the European market in 2013. By that point, GM had already shuttered Saab due to their bankruptcy issues a few years prior, leaving Opel as the only presence General Motors had in Europe. Until Stellantis acquired Opel in 2017 and made them 15 times better, that is. So there we are, Chevrolet failed in Europe because the Chevrolets that most people were buying were just thinly disguised prioritized cheap Korean cars that were about as desirable as getting a sledgehammer to your face. That leaves us with the last remaining member of the big three, Chrysler. Originally, Chrysler had a decent presence in Europe thanks to the merger of Simca, Roots, and Barreiros. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly. And eventually the PSA group would continue selling Chrysler vehicles throughout the 80s badged as Talbots. Or at least I think so, that's all the sense I could make of the research I did online. It's a little complicated. So that technically means that Chrysler did the Europe presence thing properly at first. They rebadged various vehicles from the aforementioned brands, all of which were European, and sold them as Chryslers in Europe. That's fine. So what happened? Well, Chrysler was acquired by Daimler AG in 1998. Leading to the creation of Daimler Chrysler. This gave Chrysler money, which they would eventually burn completely, and Daimler was losing so much money on Chrysler that they would sell them again in 2007. However, this also gave Chrysler a channel to re-enter Europe once again. And they did. Now, as I mentioned up there, GM's big mistake was convincing Europeans that they're buying a Chevrolet when they were in fact buying a Daewoo. In other words, they plucked cheap cars from their Korean arm and sold them to Europeans. So what was Chrysler's big mistake? Chrysler's big mistake was not bothering with basically anything. The relaunch in Europe featured the compact Neon, the Stratus midsize sedan, and the Voyager minivan, or as you may know it, the Town & Country. Sure,
yes.
The Voyager offered a diesel engine and a manual transmission because Europe, am I right? The Stratus, which was actually a Dodge vehicle by the way, was available with either a 4-cylinder or a V6 engine. Remember, mid-sized sedan in Europe in the 90s with no diesel power. Here's an interesting fact. The cops in Macedonia used the Stratus for the longest time as a patrol vehicle. And as far as I've heard, all but a few of them went memories up, and I'm pretty sure that nobody else except the police force actually bought them as civilian vehicles. Either that or they all exploded or destroyed themselves, I don't know. Chrysler's not bothering with basically anything continued well into the late 2000s. The widely hated Dodge Nitro was worse than other European SUVs.
Can you guys just take a look at this right here? What even is that, bro? This guy in the back jet skiing, though. He's looking fly. The car, though? That bulky car, boy. This thing is getting like 20 miles to the gallon max on a very good day. Oh my god.
In just about every way, and it was too big for Europe. The 300C
thing is too big for anyone.
The wagon version, which was just a Dodge Magnum with a front end swap, and a diesel engine from Mercedes, was still worse than the European competitors in just about every conceivable way. Chrysler even tried to sell the widely hated Sebring to European customers. Yes, that includes the convertible too. Again, these were all vehicles designed for the American market, and Chrysler simply brought them over and updated them slightly to meet European regulations.
I think the problem is, you guys, before you bring it over to Europe, update it for the American market better. Because Chrysler is seen as like, if you look at American car manufacturers, Chrysler, it's like what your grandma drives, because that's like the only car that she's had for like 20 years, and it has like 20,000 miles on it just to go to the grocery store. That's the only reason it's still running. Like, the Chryslers are just, usually when you see a Chrysler on the road, it has some window tint. There's a criminal driving that car. They're just so like garbage and cheap. But I gotta say, shout out to this guy for the narration. He's not telling it how it is. Funny as hell. I'm so glad we've watched this video, guys. I do have a passion for cars as well, so it is interesting to hear some of the reasons why American cars failed in Europe. Again, my suspicions were correct. It's really just, if you want, I think there was a grocery store that failed in Europe as well. I want to say it was Walmart, but I think it may have been something else. But again, the theme there is consistent. The grocery store, I believe it failed in Germany because they just didn't change their business model to fit the needs of Europeans. Like, you can't just bring something that works somewhere else across the world. Like, the only people who would think that would work would be Americans. That's the problem here, because they're like, oh, we have the best thing. Like, we're going to bring it there. It's going to sell super fast. No, you have to alter and tailor your designs and your line of vehicles to fit your customers' needs. The customers change when you go across the world, bro. Like, it's a completely different continent and place. Whoever thought that would work, I really want to see, bro. I really hope they got fired. Like, the team of people that was running GM and still are running GM, like, so embarrassing. You guys are so embarrassing. Did absolutely, whatever research you did, it was terrible. It did not work. So that's pathetic, and they deserve all the losses and money that they face from that. Because it's just so, like, really? Are you serious?
To meet European regulations. They were practically unchanged from their American counterparts. And that's a problem because it's a well-known fact that American and European car buyer tastes are vastly different. Oh, how could I forget? Chrysler also tried selling the PT Cruiser in Europe. That went about as well as you.
Guys, this car gives me PTSD, bro. Oh my God. Look, first of all, look at this. Second of all, at my first year in university, there was this kid who drove a PT Cruiser, right? And on the side panels, like right here, it was like blue flames going down the side. Like the car was blue, and it had like these blue and white flames that went down the sides of the car, bro. It was the ugliest car I may have seen in my life. But like, even without the flames just made it funny. Like, honestly, shout out to him, because that's cool. You're making an ugly car have flames on it. I respect that. But this car on its own, like, what were they thinking? This might be the ugliest car in existence. It's just so ugly.
You'd expect. The writing was on the wall. The 300C completely lost to the E-Class A6 5 Series, which is hilarious because the 300C of that time was based on the E-Class. The Stratus, meanwhile, lost out to stuff like the Passat, the Honda Accord, the Renault Laguna, the Audi A4, the Mercedes C-Class, and so on. The Jetta and every other C-segment sedans were running rings around the Sebring, and every other European minivan, the VW Charan, the Ford S-Max and Galaxy, yes, they were made by Ford of Europe, it counts, the Peugeot 807 and its siblings kick the Voyager's ass 10 times over. Eventually, Chrysler just completely lost its mind and decided to continue its presence in Europe in an entirely new and balls-to-the-wall way. The second generation Lancia Thema was the second generation Chrysler 300C with a few Lancia badges, and the Lancia Voyager was the same thing but for the later town and country. I also realized I completely forgot to write in the script that Lancia models were sold as Chryslers in the United Kingdom for no reason that I can think of. There probably is a reason, probably a weird, unusual reason either way. They did the long walk of shame back to North America, and eventually they wound up selling to Americans all of 2 cars, one of which recently went out of production. Nowadays, Stellantis is focusing its efforts on other Mopar vehicles, and Chrysler is left with just a single model, the Pacifica minivan. But that one is pretty good from what I've read, so that's okay. And those are the reasons why American cars in Europe failed. Thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel.
Great video. Big shout out to the Core Motive. Link to this one will be in the description, guys. But let me know what your thoughts are on this whole situation and video, and if you have more insights to provide. And also, if anyone owns an American car that lives in Europe, how's that going for you? Let me know in the comments down below. But I appreciate you guys, appreciate all the support recently. Thank you so much for watching, and hit that subscribe button so you stay tuned for more videos. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.